Welcome home to St. Anne's. Please be seated. We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons.
All right,
we can't wait to meet you.
We have to always perfectly time this for those of us who are here in person and those of us who are with us virtually and in spirit. So that's why there's a little bit of a disconnect there. Wow. I almost feel like I don't need to preach after our New Testament lesson right there about love. And you can't love God unless you love one another. So I feel like I could really just sit down because I'm not sure what else I really need to say. But wow, do we need to hear that in our world. So you cannot claim to love God. You love God only as much as you love the person that you like the least. I'm going to say that again because it's super, super important. I think that's really the kernel of truth in that passage. We love God only as much as we love the person that we like the least. There is no fear of others. There is only love of others. And if we have learned anything in our recent times, it is that we ought not fear one another, that we always love. If you don't like them, love them. I don't care. God doesn't care because we cannot love God unless we love that which God created. Period. It's that simple. And I really could just end the sermon right there. So I'm going to end that sermon right there because I don't know what else to say besides love people. Love people. Love one another. Love the ones that you don't like. Love, 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 love. If it's not about love, it's not about God. God is never about separate, never about difference, never about any of that stuff. God is always about love. Love, love, love. If it's not about love, it's not about God. Period. End of story. All right, so we're going to set that sermon right there because I don't think there's much more that I need to say about that. It speaks for itself. Now, it's a little bit harder to live. I understand that. It is really, really hard to live. It's not hard to preach. It's really easy to preach. But talk to me again when I get to like Thursday about how well I'm living it. That's a little bit different. It's super easy to preach though. So let's talk about our gospel reading because I love this gospel reading. And I know many of you guys know this. I grew up on a farm. I love plants. This is my language. So when Jesus uses the imagery of agriculture and caring for plants, that is language that speaks to me. And I hope that it's language that speaks to you too, because I think there's nowhere that God is more present for us than in dirt. In the green and the earth, that is when we really, really come face to face with God in our lives. I really, truly believe that. We can spend all the time that we want loving people, which is what we're called to do, but really I think we are one with God, or at least I am one with God when I am in nature and when I am in with the plants and the dirt and all that stuff. So this is a message that really speaks to me. So I want to share that a little bit with you because it is spring. And I don't know about you, but I leave all my plants untrimmed in the fall because I know, intellectually, I know that I shouldn't do anything in my garden until Mother's Day. I'm from Iowa. I'm not stupid. I know that there are like 5 versions of spring. There's the first version in like March when you're like, oh, spring is coming. And you get like a couple 70-degree days and it feels really great. And you're like, yeah, spring is coming. And your burpees catalog comes and you're like, yeah. And then there's a hard freeze again. So then we go through it again, and we usually get some sort of hard freeze / snow / a couple of inches of snow. What the heck was that? I don't even want to talk about it. I was really upset when that happened a couple of weeks ago. So you really shouldn't do anything until later. So in the fall, I don't trim back anything because I know that this is going to happen. I know that I'm going to want to be out in my garden in the spring. So that's when I prune stuff because I feel like I'm out in the dirt and I feel like I'm doing things, but I know I'm not going to actually kill anything by planting it, and then it's going to go when there's a hard freeze. So I just pruned my roses. And by prune my roses, I really mean I made my husband do it. But I told him what to do. I sat on the porch with my coffee and I said, prune here and prune here. And this is always the conversation, because my husband is not a plant person. He grudgingly accepts that part of the lawn belongs to me and I put flowers in it. And he grudgingly has his grass that I grudgingly put up with. Okay, that's how our marriage works. There's a lot of grudges, if you can't tell. And so I said, okay, we need to trim the roses back. And this goes every single time we do this. Every time we prune, I say, okay, cut back all this way. And he's like, so he cuts some. And he's like, okay, is that, no, I want you to cut back more. Everything that is old growth, I want it completely cut back. And he's like, you're going to kill it. And I said, I'm not going to kill it. It looks like I'm going to kill it, and it feels like I'm going to kill it, but I'm not going to kill it. This is what the plant needs. Now, it feels awful, especially because one of my roses, which is what I call the rose that ate Chicago, it had already thrown out all this new growth, and it has little buds on it. It's about to bloom. And I said, cut it. And he's like, you're going to kill it. I said, cut it. I'm not going to kill it. It's going to come back and it's going to be healthier and better for having gone through this. Who in the last year has felt like that rose? Where you're like, I don't want to cut it anymore. I've already cut enough. And God says, no, we're going to cut more. And you're like, no, we've cut enough. No, we're going to cut more. That is the Christian life, because when we go all the way back from that dead wood that we think is our real stuff, we think that that's healthy and good, that's what we're living for, that old wood, it's not. What we need is the new growth from God, and that can't come in its true form until all that junk is cut away. All that stuff that we feel like is our identity and ourself has to be cut away. Because that's the stuff that creates fear. That's the stuff that creates prejudice. That's the stuff that creates hate and greed, all that stuff that you and I carry. And let's be real, we all carry it. We all have this stuff that is part of our identity that we've clung to, and frankly, we've spent years and years and years, decades, building it and creating it. And it feels like if that goes away, who am I? If I am not all this stuff, who am I? And that's scary sometimes. And when it's being cut away, it feels scary. But that is what we are called to do. We are called to let that stuff go away. We are called to be okay with the cutting, because it seems painful. It seems brutal, doesn't it? But I promise you, when spring comes, when real, honest to God, true spring comes, there is new growth, and in that new growth there is life. And in that life there is production and fruit and the stuff that we were called to be and do all along. And the church is going through that. Because here's what I'm going to tell you about the church. The church likes old dead wood. We call it tradition. And then we give it fake Latin names that we made up, because that makes us feel really good about ourselves. And so we put all this stuff on it. And really what it comes from is our fear of change. Would you believe that really the church is just a big version of humans? Because guess what? It was created by humans. So all that stuff that we fear as individuals, the church fears as a larger institution. We don't like change. We like it just the way it was, and then we put, all sorts of fancy stuff on it. We letter it, and we put maybe a little plaque next to it that says, Marge gave this. And everybody's like, who's Marge? Well, she died 72 years ago, but we all remember her because she gave that light bulb. So we put a plaque right next to it. And then we call the light bulb something in Latin that's not even a real word. And so we put all this stuff around it, because when you peel all that stuff away, it's really about It's about our fear of what might come. So the church in general has been facing some changes and losses and differences in, the last, really 20 years have been hard for Christianity. And then the pandemic, and so we were barely, the church, I don't mean we as St. Anne's, I mean the church when I say we're kind of barely holding it together. And then the pandemic came. And, oh wow, then it really, really hurt. And we hemorrhaged. We absolutely hemorrhaged. Because here's the thing, we had to change. We had to go online. And suddenly, our behavior had to match our theology of we are one everywhere, which has been our theology all the time, believe it or not. I know, that's our theology. Our theology really comes from the Bible and Scripture. Not from our behavior. But anyway, so then suddenly that had to change, and we're like, oh gosh, what do we do now? And then we became really, really worried. We became worried about money, and we became worried about how we're reaching people, and are people ever going to come back? And what about this? What about that? And I will tell you, we have been pruned, and it's been brutal. It has been brutal. It's been brutal emotionally. It's been brutal financially. It's just brutal because change is brutal. Anyone go through a change in their life and it felt great? You woke up one morning, you're like, I just feel like I'm going to change everything today. No, nobody does that. And God knows that we don't do that. And so God comes to us as individuals, and God comes to us as a church and a people and says, you know what? Clearly you didn't get it. Clearly you missed it. So we're going to do some stuff, and we're going to cause some change to happen to you. And we're like, oh, yeah, we have been racist. Oh, yeah, ouch. We've got some bigotry that we got to deal with. Oh, ouch. Turns out we haven't been preaching the gospel. We've been doing all sorts of other stuff. Oh, ouch. And we can say, oh, ouch, and prune. Or we can say, I ain't doing that. I ain't going there. That looks painful and brutal, and I kind of like the way that has been, so I'm going to stick with it. But I will tell you this. If you leave the old wood, what happens? Do you know what happens with rose bushes if you leave the old wood? They go wild. They actually go wild. And up from the roots underneath will come, because a lot of roses are, they're grafted. So they have the root ball, which is a really tough, nasty rose that you don't really want. And if you don't take care of that, it will go wild. The rose will go wild. If you've ever gone to an old homestead that's been deserted, you'll see some roses that have gone wild. They're awful. They're woody and they're mean, and they just don't flower the way that they're supposed to. Anyone else, when they're trusted to themselves, go wild and get thorny and go a little bit rogue? Just me. I'm the only one. All right. It's just me. It turns out nobody else struggles with this. But here's what we know. When God comes in and we are open to the change and we're open to the pruning, even though it hurts a little bit, there is new growth and there is new life. And we start doing what we were called to do all along. As a people, we start to love and we start to be who we are called to be. As a church, we start to proclaim the gospel, and we are called to love and be who we've always been called to be. And sometimes it hurts. And I get that. Sometimes as individuals, it hurts. To be who I am called to be as Meg sometimes hurts. Because sometimes it means it's not what I wanted. And sometimes it means it's not who I thought I was going to be. And that's okay. Because the person that I am called to be is so much better and more beautiful than the person I want to be. And that doesn't come without pain and loss and suffering. Because the most beautiful, remember, the thorns protect the most beautiful of flowers. We are called to the thorns. We are called to the pruning. We are called to all that stuff. Because that is what produces who we are called to be, our true flower self. Also,
We
love
want you
one
to
another.
know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on
Because
Sundays.
God told
Please
us
be
to.
sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons.
And He loved
We
us
can't
first.
wait
And you're
to
never
meet
going to
you.
love as well as God does anyway, so